The phone's screen glowed in the dimming light of my living room, a cold, blue rectangle of pure betrayal. I'd heard the chime the same friendly triplet had always made, and picked it up expecting a last-minute question about the rehearsal dinner. Maybe what color tie to wear. But the words weren't a question. They were a command. A dismissal, don't come to the wedding. 6 words. That's all it took for my son to erase 28 years of being his father. The air just left the room. Vanished. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each swing of the pendulum a hammer blow in the silence. My thumb hovered over the screen, the glass smooth and chillingly impersonal. I typed a question mark. Just that. A single, pathetic curve of digital punctuation. It felt immediate. A text bubble popped up. 3 little dots, dancing. Then they stopped. Nothing. He'd seen it. He'd chosen not to answer. The finality of it was a physical weight on my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a door being slammed in my face. The ice in my whiskey glass shifted with a soft, lonely clink. I hadn't even realized I'd picked it up. The amber liquid did nothing to cut the cold feeling spreading through my veins. I looked around the room, at the photos on the mantel. Him on my shoulders at the beach, both of us squinting and sunburned. Holding his tiny hand, walking him to his first day of kindergarten. The proud, awkward hug at his college graduation. My work-roughened hands patting his back in a cheap suit. A lifetime of building something for him. Providing. And with one text message, he'd condemned the entire structure. He didn't want me there. He didn't want the man who'd built the foundation of his life to witness the pinnacle of it. The pain was a sharp, hot thing behind my eyes, but it was immediately followed by a wave of something else. Something cold and clear and terrifyingly calm. It was the same feeling I'd get right before I'd walk onto a construction site and have to fire a crew for cutting corners. The emotional noise just shut off. And all that was left was the facts, the situation, and the necessary consequence. My fingers, which had felt so clumsy and numb a moment before, now moved with a strange, precise purpose. They didn't dial my son's number. They didn't type out a furious, pleading response. They scrolled through my contacts past Jason Home and Jason Cell and landed on a name I hadn't called in years. Arthur Finch. The lawyer. The architect of the single biggest promise I'd ever made my son. The ring of the phone was a dry, electronic chirp in my ear. 1, 2. It was just after 6 p.m. He might not even. Arthur Finch. His voice was the same, dry as old paper, precise. Arthur, it's Robert Miller. A slight pause, the rustle of papers. Robert, it's been a while. I trust you're well. The professional pleasantry was almost laughable, given the tectonic shift happening in my world. The contingency we discussed, I said, my voice sounding foreign to me. It was flat, steady, completely devoid of the earthquake happening inside. The revocation clause, in Jason's trust. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him adjusting his glasses, pulling the heavy file from his mental archives. I recall the provisions, yes. The instrument is quite clear on your powers of revocation. May I ask the impetus for this inquiry? I watched a single bead of condensation trace a path down the side of my glass. It's not an inquiry, Arthur. It's an instruction. Initiate it, effective immediately. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I knew what I was asking him to do. I'd sat in his oak-paneled office 5 years ago setting it all up. $3 million. A lifetime of sweat, of missed weekends, of risking everything on second mortgages and bids that kept me awake at night. All of it, locked away in a beautifully crafted box for my boy. A box I had just instructed my lawyer to take a sledgehammer to. Robert, he said, his tone shifting from professional to solemn. The full revocation? This is irreversible. I must counsel you to perhaps take 24 hours to consider. The consideration is done, Arthur, I interrupted, my voice still that same, unnervingly calm monotone. The trigger event has occurred, Execute the directive. Liquidate all assets. Begin the process of reallocation to the Miller Foundation as we outlined. As you wish, he said, the words heavy with finality. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. I'll draw up the papers first thing in the morning. You'll have my call when it's done. Thank you, Arthur. I ended the call. The phone slipped from my hand and landed softly on the leather arm of the chair. The screen went dark. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling and then vanishing. The hum of the refrigerator kicked on in the kitchen. Normal sounds of a normal evening. I took a slow sip of the whiskey. It tasted like nothing. I had just unmade my son, not the boy I raised. That boy was already gone, erased by the man who sent that text. I had unmade the future he thought he owned. The luxurious loft in the city, the country club membership, the life of ease he thought he was entitled to while he was ashamed of the hands that built it. It was all gone, with one phone call. I sat there in the growing dark, and I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the regret, the paternal panic, the voice in my head that would scream at me for what I'd just done. But it didn't come. All I felt was a vast, quiet emptiness, and the certain, cold knowledge that he'd been the one to swing the hammer first. I'd just decided to finish the demolition. The smell of sawdust. That's the first thing that always comes back to me. It's a clean, honest smell. It smells like work. It smells like building something. I'd come home long after dark, my boots caked in dried mud, my knuckles scraped raw from a misplaced hammer swing or a stubborn piece of rebar. The house would be quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the gentle sound of Mrs. Gable next door, watching her television. I'd tiptoe down the hall, pushing open his door just a crack. A nightlight would cast a soft glow over his sleeping face. He'd be surrounded by action figures, a comic book tinted on his chest, and I'd just stand there for a minute, watching him. The exhaustion would just melt away. Every back-breaking day, every frustrating negotiation with a supplier, every moment of doubt, it was all for him. Everything was for him. His mother, she left when he was just a baby, said the life of a struggling contractor's wife wasn't the one she signed up for, said she needed more, so it was just me and him, my boy, Jason. I made a promise to myself, standing in that doorway night after night. He would never want for anything. He would never feel that same lack. He would have the foundation I never had. I'd slip out, head to the kitchen, and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for his lunch the next day. I'd write a little note on the napkin. Knock 'em dead, champ, or proud of you. I'd stuff it right next to the bag of chips. It was a small thing, but it was ours. The business, Miller Construction, started in my garage with a second-hand pickup truck and a loan from the bank that gave me nightmares. But it grew. Slowly. One driveway paving job led to a kitchen remodel, which led to a whole house. I was good at it. Honest work for a fair price. Word gets around. I remember one sweltering Saturday in July. Jason must have been about 10. He was supposed to be at a friend's birthday party at the pool. I was pouring a concrete slab for a new shed, my shirt soaked through with sweat. I look up, and there he is, standing at the edge of the property line holding 2 dripping wet paper cups. "Dad?" he called out, his voice small. "Jason? What are you doing here, son? You're missing the party." He shuffled forward, holding out one of the cups. It was lemonade, mostly melted ice. "I brought you this. It's hot." I took the cup, my rough, calloused hands looking enormous next to his little fingers. "Thank you, buddy, but you should be with your friends, having fun." He shrugged, taking a sip of his own drink. "This is more fun. Can I help?" I laughed. "It's hard work, Jace." "I'm strong," he said, and he puffed out his little chest. "See?" So I let him. I gave him a tiny trowel and let him smooth out a corner of the slab. He worked with this intense, serious concentration, his tongue poking out the side of his mouth. He got concrete all over his nice shorts. I didn't care. We sat on the tailgate of my truck when we were done, sharing the warm lemonade, watching the sun go down. "When I grow up," he said, his voice full of certainty. "I'm gonna work with you. We'll be partners, Miller and Son." I put my arm around him, pulling him close. He smelled like sunshine and little boy sweat. "It's a deal, partner." That was the dream. That was the whole point of it all. Not the money, not the houses we built. It was him. It was us. The years kept turning. The business kept growing. The small-time contractor became a reputable developer. The single pickup truck became a fleet of 5. We moved out of the little house with the creaky floors and into a nicer place and a better school district. But I never let him forget where it all started. On his 16th birthday, I gave him a set of tools: a real hammer, a tape measure, a level. "A man should know how to build things," I told him, "and how to fix them when they break." He seemed to appreciate it. I think he did. The trust fund idea came to me the day we dropped him off at college. University of Pennsylvania. An Ivy League kid. My boy. I was bursting with pride so fierce it felt like it could crack my ribs. We stood there on that bustling sidewalk, students and parents swirling around us. He looked so young and so old, all at once. I clapped him on the shoulder. "You study hard, you hear? Don't worry about anything, not a single thing. It's all taken care of." And I meant it. I'd already been setting it aside for years. A little from every job, a percentage of every profit. It was his future, his safety net, his launch pad. I'd set up a meeting with Arthur Finch, the best estate lawyer in the state. We crafted it together. A revocable living trust. $3 million. It would mature and be fully his on his 30th birthday. It was the ultimate expression of my love. The final, definitive proof that I had kept my promise. That he would never want for anything. "This is incredible, Dad," he'd said when I finally told him about it during his sophomore year, his voice full of awe over the phone. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Jason. It's yours. Everything I've ever done, it's all for you." It was the truth. It was the only truth I knew. The business, the long hours, the sawdust, the concrete, the sweat. It was all just a love letter to my son. A love letter written in foundation piers and framing lumber and a $3 million promise. I thought it was unbreakable. I thought we were. The change didn't happen overnight. It was a slow leak. A quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. It started after he met Chloe. He brought her home for a weekend, and from the moment she stepped out of her pristine German convertible, I felt it. A distance. She was polite, sure. A perfect porcelain doll of a girl with a handshake that felt like holding a cold, dead fish. She was from old mainline money, and you could smell it on her. Not just the expensive, cloying perfume that seemed to cling to the air long after she'd left her room, but the scent of inherited ease. She'd never had peanut butter on a napkin in her life. We were in the kitchen. I was making my famous spaghetti, the one with the meat sauce that simmers all day. Jason's favorite. Or it used to be. I was wearing my usual Saturday clothes, a broken-in Miller construction t-shirt and a pair of jeans. "Dad," Jason said, his voice a little too light, a little too casual. He was leaning against the counter, watching me. "That shirt has a hole in the sleeve." I glanced down. "So it does. Good eye, partner. Means it's finally broken in." I grinned at him, waiting for the shared joke. He didn't smile back. He just nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe we should go shopping tomorrow. Get you something a little nicer for dinner tonight." The "we" was new. The nicer was a dagger. I looked at him. Really looked. His sweater was cashmere. His jeans were the kind that looked artfully faded and cost more than my first truck. He'd been home for 3 hours, and he hadn't once called me partner. Dinner was a quiet, strained affair. The sauce, which usually got a rave review, was met with a polite, "It's very robust, Mr. Miller," from Chloe. Jason spent most of the meal explaining the complexities of derivative trading to me, talking about things I didn't understand in a tone that suggested I probably couldn't. I'd ask a simple question, like, "But what does it actually build?" and he'd exchange a faint, patient smile with Chloe. "It builds wealth, Dad," he'd say, as if explaining it to a child. The final nail in the coffin of that weekend came on Sunday morning. We were having coffee on the back patio. The air was cool, the smell of fresh-cut grass coming from next door. It should have been nice. Jason cleared his throat. "So, Dad, Chloe and we've been talking about the future." "That's good," I said, sipping my black coffee. "You should." "And her parents, they're very big on protecting assets. You know, legacy planning." I nodded slowly. "Makes sense." So he continued, not meeting my eyes. "They've insisted we get a prenuptial agreement, and their lawyer, he was asking about my assets, my future assets." The penny dropped. It landed with a cold, metallic thud in the pit of my stomach. I just looked at him, waiting. "I told him about the trust," Jason said, finally looking at me. His expression wasn't grateful. It was calculating. "The one you set up," he said, "it's a solid instrument. A really strong foundation for us. For our future. Our future. Not our future as in his and mine. His and Chloe's. He was already dividing the world into us and him. He was inventorying my love, my life's work, and presenting it to his future in-laws for their approval. The trust wasn't a gift anymore. It was a line item, a box to be checked. The visits home became less and less frequent. The phone calls got shorter. When I did see him, the criticisms were casual, constant, and they always cut deep. We went to a nice steakhouse for my birthday, just the two of them and me. I ordered a beer. "Dad, maybe try the Pinot Noir," Jason suggested, not even looking up from his menu. "It pairs better." I held up my hand to the waiter. "The beer's fine, son. I know what I like." He sighed, a soft, exasperated sound. "It's just about presenting the right image." The worst was the dinner with Chloe's parents. They'd invited me to their club. A place with hushed tones, towering ceilings, and walls lined with portraits of stern-looking men who'd never held a hammer. I wore the new shirt Jason had bought me. It felt stiff and unnatural. Her father, Charles, a man with a handshake like a vice and eyes like a bank vault, led the interrogation. "So, Robert, construction." "That's hands-on." He said it was like it was a contagious disease. "It is," I said, forcing a smile. "I like building things I can see, things that last." "Fascinating." Chloe's mother, Eleanor, chimed in, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And do you employ many people?" "A crew of 20, I said, pride creeping into my voice despite myself. "Good men. We're building a new subdivision on the east side, 50 homes." "How quaint," Charles said, taking a sip of his scotch. "I'm in private equity. We built a portfolio last year that returned 40%. Now that's building something." Jason laughed a little too loudly at that. "See, Dad, this is the big leagues." I sat through the rest of the meal, pushing my food around my plate, listening to them talk about markets and mergers and vacations in places I couldn't pronounce. I was a ghost at the table. A relic. A simple hands-on man in a stiff shirt, sitting in a room full of people who built nothing but spreadsheets. And my son, my partner, was one of them. He was laughing at their jokes, agreeing with their points, and every time he looked at me, I saw a flicker of something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Not love. Not respect. Embarrassment. The drive home that night was silent. The air in the car was thick with everything we weren't saying. The dream of Miller and Son was dead. It had been replaced by Jason and Chloe, and there was no room in that picture for sawdust and peanut butter sandwiches. The foundation was cracking, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It was heavy. Thick, creamy cardstock that felt more like a legal summons than a celebration. The envelope was lined with some silky material. I opened it carefully at my kitchen table, a sliver of morning sun cutting across the polished wood. The script was an elaborate, swirling font. "Mr. and Mrs. Charles and Eleanor Whitmore request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter, Chloe Elizabeth." It went on. It was all Whitmores. Their names, their estate, their world. I had to scan down to the very bottom to find my son's name. To Jason Robert Miller. They'd even put him second. My fingers traced the embossed letters. Jason Robert Miller. I'd chosen that middle name. For my father. A good, honest man who'd worked in a factory his whole life. It looked so out of place here, surrounded by all that Whitmore pomp. And then I saw it. My own name. Or what was supposed to be my name. Robert. They'd spelled it, Roberts, an extra, Sati. A stupid, tiny mistake. But it wasn't tiny. It was a message. It was a dismissal. I wasn't important enough to get the spelling right. I was an afterthought, a name on a list they'd hurriedly copied down. I sat there for a long time, just staring at that extra letter, feeling it burn a hole right through me. I called him. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice breathless, distracted. I could hear voices and laughter in the background. Dad? Hey, now's not a great time. We're finalizing the seating chart. I got the invitation, Jason. Oh, great. Beautiful, right? Chloe's mom worked with this amazing calligrapher from New York. It's something, I said, my voice tight. They spelled my name wrong. A beat of silence. Then a light, airy laugh. Oh, did they? A typo. Don't worry about it. These things happen. It's just paper. Just paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. It's not just paper, Jason. It's my name. When's the rehearsal dinner? I need to know so I can book a hotel. The background noise on his end suddenly muted, as if he'd covered the phone. His voice dropped to a low, hurried whisper. Oh, about that. Dinner. It's actually a really small thing. Just immediate family. And the wedding party. It's at the Whitmore's Club, and it's super exclusive. The guest list is locked down tight. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and clear. I wasn't in the immediate family. Not anymore. I see, I said, the words ash in my mouth. But the wedding, he said, his voice brightening again, a salesman closing a deal. The wedding you'll be at. It's going to be incredible. Just be there, okay? It'll mean a lot. He hung up before I could say another word. I sat there, holding the dead phone, looking at the misspelled invitation. Just paper. The cold, calm feeling from the night of the text began to seep back into my bones. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. He was systematically cutting me out, sanding down my rough edges until I was smooth enough, small enough, to not embarrass him at his new shiny life. I couldn't sit there. I couldn't just wait for the wedding day to come, to put on my rented tuxedo and play my part as the quaint blue-collar father he was so ashamed of. I got in my truck. I didn't have a plan. I just started driving. The 2-hour trip to the Whitmore's neck of the woods was a blur of green exits and roaring semis. My hands were clenched on the wheel. I wasn't angry. I was conducting a survey, a final inspection of the ruins. I pulled into the sprawling, manicured grounds of the Willow Creek Country Club just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the perfect green fairways. The place was a fortress of old money. I could see figures moving behind the large, lit-up windows of the main clubhouse. Laughter and the gentle clink of glass drifted on the evening air. The rehearsal dinner. I parked my dusty F-150 between a gleaming Porsche and a pristine Range Rover. It looked like a stray dog at a dog show. I didn't get out. I just sat there, engine off, watching. I saw them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a sea of pastel colors and navy blazers, and there he was, my son. He had his arm around Chloe, holding a glass of champagne, laughing. He looked like he'd been born there. He looked like he'd never known a day of hard work in his life. I watched for 10 minutes. 20. A waiter passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Jason took one, making some joke that made the people around him laugh. He was the center of attention, the golden boy. And then I saw Charles Whitmore, Chloe's father, clink a fork against his glass. The room quieted. He started to speak. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the jovial, proud expression on his face. He put his arm around Jason, pulling him close, a fatherly gesture. My gesture. And then Jason took the glass. He was going to make a toast. He was smiling, looking out at the crowd. He said something. People chuckled. He said something else, and the chuckle grew into a full laugh. He was on a roll, and then his expression changed. It became performative, mocking. He shrugged Charles's arm off in a theatrical way, puffing out his chest. He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the outside world, toward my world. And that's when I heard it, not the words, but the tone, the cadence of a joke, the setup, the punchline. And I saw him, my son, my Jason, look right at Charles Whitmore and say the words that would echo in my soul forever. I saw his lips form the shapes clearly. I saw the smug, ingratiating smile. I guess I raised myself. Thankfully, I finally found a real family with real class. The room erupted. The laughter wasn't just polite now. It was roaring, unified. They were laughing with him. They were laughing at me, at the simple, hands-on man who'd built him, who'd loved him, who'd sacrificed for him. He was erasing me, publicly and completely, to win favor with his new tribe. The cold feeling in my veins turned to ice. The survey was over. The inspection was complete. The structure was unsound. It was built on a foundation of shame and lies, and it needed to be torn down. I put the truck in reverse. I didn't look back. The laughter followed me all the way out of the parking lot. But I didn't hear any mockery anymore. All I heard was the starting pistol. And the race, now, was mine to win. The headlights of my truck carved twin tunnels through the oppressive darkness of the country roads. I drove on autopilot. The image of Jason's smug, laughing face burned onto the back of my eyelids. The laughter, that was the sound that kept playing on a loop, drowning out the hum of the engine. It wasn't the hurt that was consuming me now. It was a cold, crystalline clarity. He had drawn a line in the sand. No, he hadn't just drawn it. He'd poured concrete over it, built a wall, and then stood on the other side and jeered at me. I didn't speed. I drove the exact limit. Every action felt deliberate, measured, part of a new and terrible plan that was forming in the icy silence of my mind. I pulled into my driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires like bones. The house was dark, a silent monument to a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the cab, the engine ticking as it cooled. The night air was still. No crickets, nothing. I took out my phone. The screen was a brutal white rectangle in the darkness. I didn't type a long message. I didn't pour my heart out. I gave him facts. 4 words. I typed them slowly, my thumb hitting each letter with a definitive tap. Saw the show. Congratulations. I pressed send. I placed the phone on the passenger seat. Screen up. I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 30 seconds. Maybe less. The phone didn't ring. It vibrated. A frantic, angry buzzing against the leather seat, lighting up the cab with his caller ID picture. A recent one. Him and Chloe looking perfect and untouchable. I let it buzz. Once. Twice. On the 3rd ring, I picked it up. I took a breath, steadying the cold, flat calm in my voice. Jason. His voice wasn't calm. It was a hot, sharp wire of panic and fury. What is that supposed to mean? Saw the show? What are you talking about? Were you spying on me? I was in the parking lot, I said, my voice even. A simple statement of fact. The parking lot! He exploded. You drove all the way out here to lurk in the parking lot. God, Dad, that is so pathetic. So creepy. Do you have any idea how that looks? What if someone had seen you? What if Chloe's parents had seen your beat-up old truck sitting out there? You would have completely embarrassed me. There it was. Not an apology, not an explanation, not a shred of remorse. Just raw, unfiltered terror that I had almost tarnished his precious image. I was already embarrassed for you, Jason, I said, the words cool and quiet. Watching you debase yourself for a room full of people who will never see you as anything but the help with a trust fund. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. I'd hit a nerve. You don't know anything about them. You don't know anything about this world. This is real life, Dad. This is the world I belong in. They appreciate ambition. They appreciate success. Not just swinging a hammer until you're too old to stand up straight. They appreciate your money, Jason, I said. The truth of it is hard and cold as a diamond. The money I gave you. The money I earned with this hammer you're so ashamed of. It's my money, he shrieked, his voice cracking with a petulant, entitled rage I'd never heard before. It's in my trust. You gave it to me. It's mine. And this is the life it's meant for. Not some middle-class fantasy you've been clinging to. Why can't you just be happy for me? Why can't you just be happy for me from a distance? The words hung in the air between us, the final, devastating confession. From a distance. Don't come too close. Don't let them see you. Don't let them smell the sawdust on me. The last tiny flicker of hope I didn't even know I was still clinging to, extinguished. The love letter of my life had been returned to sender, stamped, returned to sender, embarrassing. The coldness in my veins solidified into something absolute, unbreakable. There was no anger left, no pain. There was only the next step. "Oh, I understand perfectly now, Jason," I said, my voice so calm it was almost a whisper. He must have had to press the phone hard against his ear to hear it. "I finally see the world you belong to, and I see the man you've chosen to become." "What is that supposed to mean?" he snapped, but a sliver of uncertainty had crept into his tone. "The predator hears a new, unfamiliar sound in the dark. It means you've made your choice," I said, "and I will respect it. Completely." "Good," he said, the bravado forced, trying to regain control of a conversation that was suddenly slipping away from him. "That's all I've ever wanted. Now I have to get back to my real family. We'll see you at the wedding. Just try to wear a suit that fits, okay?" "Oh, I will be at a distance, Jason," I said, the promise ironclad and final, a permanent one. I ended the call. I didn't wait for his response. The buzzing of the phone started again immediately, his name flashing over and over on the screen like a distress beacon. I watched it. I watched him panic. I watched him realize that the conversation hadn't ended the way he'd planned, that my calmness wasn't defeated. It was something else entirely. I didn't answer. I opened the truck door, the dome light flooding the cab. I picked up the still vibrating phone, held it in my palm for a moment, and then dropped it into the half-full bucket of rainwater sitting by the porch steps. The buzzing stopped instantly. The light was extinguished. Silence. The confrontation was over. He'd said everything I needed to hear. He'd handed me the moral authorization, the final permission slip to do what needed to be done. The demolition was no longer an act of anger. It was an act of perfect, logical consequence. He had swung the wrecking ball. I was just cleaning up the site. The silence after the phone died in the bucket was the most profound I have ever experienced. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a full one. It was the sound of a decision made, a path chosen, a door closing forever. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music, just the soft chirp of a cricket finally daring to make a sound, and the distant, lonely cry of a train whistle miles away. I walked into my house. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, the latch clicking into place with the sound of finality. The living room was exactly as I'd left it, the wedding invitation still sitting on the arm of my chair like a poisonous thing. I didn't look at it. I walked past it, down the hall to my bedroom. In the back of my closet, behind a stack of old winter sweaters that smelled of mothballs, was a small, gunmetal gray safe. It wasn't fancy. It was functional, heavy. I spun the dial. The clicks were loud in the quiet house. 28 right, 17 left, 4 right. The last number was his birth date, a habit I'd never broken. The heavy door swung open with a sigh of compressed air. Inside weren't jewels or stacks of cash. There were documents, the deeds to my first properties, life insurance policies, my own will, and a single, thick, legal-sized envelope of rich, cream-colored paper. I pulled it out. It felt weighty in my hands, substantial. This was it, the physical manifestation of a father's promise. The Miller Family Trust. I carried it to the kitchen table, clearing a space amidst the mail. I switched on the overhead light, a single, bright bulb that cast a stark, unforgiving glow. I slid the documents out. The language was dense, legalese, paragraphs of whereases and hereinafters. But I knew this document. I'd sat with Arthur Finch for hours, going over every line, every clause. I'd insisted on a specific, powerful provision. Arthur had cautioned against it. "It's unusually broad power for a grantor to retain, Robert," he'd said, peering over his glasses. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain," I'd said. I was building a safety net, not a golden prison. I wanted the power to protect him, even from himself if I ever had to. I'd had a flicker of foresight, a father's fear that the money could change him. I never dreamed how right I'd be. My eyes found the clause. Section 7.2. Revocation and Reallocation. The grantor, Robert Miller, retains the sole and irrevocable right to terminate this trust, in whole or in part, at any time prior to the death of the beneficiary, should the grantor determine, in his sole discretion, that the beneficiary has acted in a manner contrary to the family's values or has irrevocably severed familial ties. Sole discretion. Those two words were the sledgehammer. They were the wrecking ball. He'd given me all the reason I would ever need. I didn't hesitate. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't second guess. The time for all that was over. The cold, clear calm that had descended upon me in the truck held firm. This was no longer about emotion. It was a transaction, a correction, an administrative fix to a profound moral error. I walked to the landline phone hanging on the kitchen wall, a relic, but it worked. I dialed Arthur Finch's personal number from memory. It was late. I didn't care. He answered on the fifth ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Lo, Arthur, it's Robert Miller." A pause, the rustle of sheets. "Robert, do you know what time it is? Is everything all right?" His voice was sharp now, switching into professional mode. "No, Arthur, it's not." My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a client giving instructions. "I am looking at Section 7.2 of the Jason Robert Miller Trust. The revocation clause." The silence on the other end was absolute. I could hear his breathing. "Robert, that's a nuclear option. What's happened?" "The trigger event has occurred," I said, my eyes scanning the legal text. "The beneficiary has irrevocably severed familial ties, publicly and with malice. I am exercising my right as grantor. I want you to initiate the revocation. Effective immediately, tonight." "Robert, for God's sake, it's nearly midnight. The markets are closed. Let's meet tomorrow morning, first thing. My office. We can talk this through." "There is nothing to talk through, Arthur," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for argument. It was the voice I used with subcontractors who tried to cut corners. "This is not a discussion. This is an instruction. You are my lawyer. I am telling you what I require. Initiate the process. Now. File whatever electronic paperwork you can. Place the calls to the custodians. Freeze all assets. I want a confirmation email from you before the sun comes up." Another long silence. I heard him sigh, a sound of profound weariness and understanding. He knew me. He knew when I was decided. "As you wish," he said, his voice formal. The sound of a man getting out of bed, of leather shoes hitting a floor. "I'll need to access the digital files. It will take me an hour." "I'll hold," I said. I heard the click of a computer keyboard, the whir of a printer. I stood in my quiet kitchen, the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the sounds of my son's future being systematically dismantled from 30 miles away. It was surreal. There was no thunder, no lightning, just the soft tapping of keys. "The primary assets are held in a blended portfolio with Fidelity," Arthur said, his voice all business now. "Stocks, bonds. The liquidation order will be placed for market open. The cash accounts at First Mercantile. I'm drafting the wire transfer orders to move the funds to the Miller Foundation account you specified. The real estate LLC holdings that will take a few days to unwind, but I'm filing the notices of intent." "Good," I said. "Tap, tap, tap, whir. The freeze is in place," he said after another few minutes. "No assets can be moved. All debit orders on the trust's checking account will be declined. The credit line is suspended." I closed my eyes. It was done. With a few keystrokes, $3 million had vanished from my son's future. The safety net had been yanked away. Email me the confirmation, Arthur. I will, Robert. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said, and it was the truth. Thank you, Arthur. I hung up the phone. The click echoed in the silent kitchen. I looked down at the trust documents spread out on the table. They were just paper now. Meaningless. I wasn't cutting him off. I was closing the account on his character. The call had taken less than 15 minutes. A single, calm, administrative phone call. And his inheritance was gone. The days that followed were quiet. The confirmation emails from Arthur arrived as promised, dry, bureaucratic kill shots landed in my inbox. I read them once, filed them in a folder labeled taxes, and didn't look again. The house was a tomb. I kept waiting for the storm, for the frantic pounding on my door, for the police to show up, called by a frantic Chloe Whitmore claiming her fiancé, sun-hinged father had stolen his future. But nothing happened. The silence was its own kind of agony. A month passed. The wedding day came and went. I didn't know if it had happened or not. I'd blocked his number, Chloe's number. I'd avoided any news source that might tell me. I worked. I came home. I sat in the silence. The cold certainty that had carried me through the phone call to Arthur began to thaw, and in its place settled a deep, hollow emptiness. I had won. I had executed a perfect, legal, and morally justified strike. So why did my victory feel so much like a funeral? I was alone in a house that was too big, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I'd built for two. It was a Tuesday morning, damp and gray. I was in the garage, sharpening chisels, losing myself in the methodical scrape of metal on stone. The landline rang. I let it go. The machine picked up. My own voice, recorded a decade ago, too cheerful, echoed in the space. "You've reached the Millers. We can't come to the phone right now." A beep. Then, a voice I didn't recognize at first. It was high, strained, cracking with a panic so raw it was almost animal. "Dad, Dad, are you there? Please, please pick up. It's an emergency. It's all gone wrong." It was Jason. But it wasn't the smooth, entitled voice from the country club. This was the voice of a little boy who'd skinned his knee. Desperate, terrified. I didn't move. My hand stayed on the chisel. I listened. "Dad, please, I'm begging you." His words tumbled over each other, choked with sobs. "The bank, they froze everything. The down payment for the loft. It was wired yesterday and today. Today they said the funds were recalled. The account, the trust account, it's gone. There's nothing there. The realtor is screaming. Chloe's parents, oh God, her parents." He was hyperventilating. I could hear him gasping for breath on the other end of the line. "They called the wedding off, Dad. They called it all off. They said I'm a fraud. They said I lied to them. About everything. Chloe, she won't even look at me. She took her ring back. She threw it at me. They've frozen me out completely. My cards are declining. My life is over." "What did you do?" The last words were a shriek, a raw, primal scream of terror and loss that echoed off the garage walls. It was the sound I thought I'd wanted to hear. The sound of perfect, absolute consequence. But hearing it now, it didn't taste like victory. It tasted like ash. "You have to fix this," he screamed into the silence. "You have to call your lawyer. You have to tell him it was a mistake. Dad, please, you have to." The machine cut him off. The time limit had been reached. A loud, final beep. And then silence. The garage was suddenly freezing. I looked at my hands, at the sharp, clean edge of the chisel. I had honed it to perfection. It could slice through wood like butter. I had wanted a tool that was sharp and precise, and I had gotten exactly what I wanted. The phone rang again immediately. The machine picked up. Another beep. This time, there were no words. Just the sound of ragged, broken weeping. The sound of a life collapsing in real time. Then, a dial tone. He called 4 more times. Each time, the message was shorter, more fragmented, more broken. The anger was gone, burned away, leaving only pure, unadulterated devastation. The final message was just 3 words, whispered in a voice so hollow and defeated it barely registered above the tape hiss. What have I done? Then, nothing. I stood there for a long time, the sharp chisel in my hand. The silence he left behind was heavier than all the screaming. I had aimed my weapon with perfect precision. I had targeted his insecurity, his status, his financial foundation, and I had obliterated all of it. It was a tactical masterpiece. So why did I feel like a monster? The moral twist wasn't about him. It was about me. I had reduced the greatest love of my life, my son, to a problem to be solved, a faulty structure to be demolished. I had taken a sledgehammer to my own legacy. I had wanted him to feel the loss of what he'd so carelessly discarded. And now, hearing the utter ruin in his voice, I felt the weight of that loss myself. I was alone in a quiet garage, holding a sharp tool, and the person I had done it all for was shattered. I had won the battle, and now I was standing in the scorched earth of my own creation, and the victory was so empty, it was crushing my soul. The revenge was perfect. And it was utterly, completely worthless. The sound of his broken voice on the answering machine tape played on a loop in my head for a week. There was a ghost in the empty rooms of my house. I'd won. I'd proven my point. I'd administered the perfect, clinical dose of consequence. And it had left me with nothing but the bitter taste of my own power. What was the point of building an empire if you have to burn it to the ground to teach your heir a lesson? The foundation was gone. For both of us. I couldn't stay in the silence. I got in my truck one morning and just drove. I didn't have a destination. My hands, on their own, turned the wheel toward the older part of the city, toward the trade school my company had partnered with years ago. The Miller Foundation, the beneficiary of my scorched earth policy, was funding a new scholarship program there. I signed the papers without looking at them. Now, I felt a morbid need to see what I had bought with my son's future. The lot was full of beat-up sedans and practical, no-nonsense trucks. The sound hit me first, not the hushed tones of a country club, but the honest, grating symphony of industry. The high whine of a skill saw biting into plywood, the rhythmic bang of a hammer, the low shout of instruction. The smell was sawdust and sweat. It was the smell of my life. I stood in the doorway of a large, sunlit workshop. A dozen kids, maybe 18, 19 years old, were bent over workbenches, their faces set in masks of concentration. They were building a small storage shed. One kid, a lanky boy with intense eyes, was wrestling with a stubborn piece of trim, his tongue poking out in frustration. An instructor, a grizzled man my age named Lou, who I'd known for years, clapped a hand on the kid's shoulder. "Not like that, Miguel. You're fighting it. Feel the grain. Let the tool do the work." Lou guided the kid's hands, showing him the angle. The kid nodded, tried again, and the piece slid into place with a satisfying click. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. It was a real smile, an earned smile. Lou saw me then and ambled over, wiping his hands on a rag. "Miller, didn't expect to see you here. Come to check on your investment?" "Something like that," I said, my voice rough. He nodded toward Miguel. "That one, Miguel. Works 2 jobs to help his mom with the rent. Got here at 6 this morning to get extra practice in. No one tells him to. He just wants it. He's got the fire." He looked at me, his eyes knowing. "It's a good thing you're doing here, Robert. This money, it changes lives. It gives kids like him a shot, a real one." I watched Miguel. He wasn't just building a shed. He was building pride. He was building a future with his own 2 hands. There was no entitlement here, no embarrassment. Just gratitude for the chance to learn, to work, to build something that lasted. The hollowness inside me began to fill with something else, something warmer. I spent the afternoon there. I didn't say much. I just watched. I helped a young woman square up a frame. I showed another kid how to read a complex blueprint. I felt the rough grain of the wood under my fingers. I breathed in the honest air. This was a legacy. Not a bank vault filled with money for someone who despised the hands that filled it, but a workshop filled with hope for kids who respected the craft. I drove home as the sun was setting, the golden light painting the streets. The ghost in my house felt quieter. I sat in my chair, but the silence was different now. It wasn't empty, it was reflective. A legacy isn't what you leave for someone, it's what you build in someone. I'd spent a lifetime trying to build a legacy in Jason, pouring everything I had into him. But the foundation was flawed. He didn't value the work. He only valued the reward. And in the end, my legacy wasn't destroyed. It was just redirected. It was in that workshop, in Miguel's proud smile, in the sound of a hammer hitting a nail true and straight. I thought I'd lost everything. I was just looking in the wrong place. The reset wasn't about going back. It was about finding a new way forward. A purpose. It was about building something that couldn't be torn down by a text message or a country club joke. Something real. And if you've ever felt taken for granted, if you've ever given your all only to have it thrown back in your face, then you know the value of something real. You know the value of building something on your own terms. Maybe your story is different, but the feeling, that's universal, that need for respect, for a legacy that means something. If this story resonated with you, if you understand that cold, hard moment of decision, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. Because I'm not done building. And I'm not done telling stories about what it means to build a life that's truly your own. Thanks for listening,